Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Um, I'm so excited about this project and showcasing this project because it was a really transformative one. And it's something I think a lot of people who are interested in maybe remodeling or mid-century modern style of architecture, or maybe just learning more about Hartman Baldwin are going to really find this really fascinating. So let's just start by talking a little bit about this project. It's a whole home renovation. It's also, we completely redesigned the grounds as well, the entire property with new plantings and landscape and hardscape. So it was a really fun project to be involved in. And just tonight, we're gonna spend a little bit of time talking about Hartman Baldwin, who we are. We're a fully integrated design build firm. By fully integrated, I mean we're architects and general contractors all under one roof, and we are helping from plan the project from the very beginning, getting all the details worked out. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and our process, but mostly we're just going to showcase this project and we're going to let this project speak for itself. So here's a before and after of the kitchen. We have another one of another area. This is the living room, and you can see just what a transformation that is. And I can imagine that anybody who's watching this tonight is going to be excited to see how we achieve that amazing transformation. Let's talk a little bit about that, but first, let me introduce myself. So my name's Jesse Emmert. I was the design build consultant on this project. By design build consultant, that's I sort of, maybe if we were going to, if you were thinking of working with us and we talked about a consultation, I'd be one of the people that you meet in the very beginning. And then if we end up working together, I'll stay with you and build the project around your around what you want. And we also are going to be joined tonight by Jeremiah Kimber, who was the project architect on this project. Jeremiah, you want to say a few words?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Jeremiah looking dapper as ever. We also have a whole bunch of folks here working behind the scenes. So if you hear me say, let's go back to that plan view, Danielle, that's Danielle working behind the scenes. We also have people to answer some questions. So there's a few of us kind of working behind the scenes tonight. So for example, I always think it's great if you have a question to ask it. For the time being, we're going to be using either the Q&A or the chat feature. So you can type your question into that and somebody will answer that question. But oftentimes I feel like if it's a question that you're asking, it's probably something somebody else is interested in as well. So at the end, we may take a few of those questions and answer them out loud. And that just gives us a chance to maybe cover something that we didn't think of or that somebody else was wondering. And I think if one person is wondering, there's probably a few more there are as well. So let me say a little bit about our process. So we have this process that Hartman Baldwin has developed over many decades, or refined, I should say, over many decades. And all of our projects work under this process. And it starts with this idea of pre-design, then we move into conceptual design, design development, and then construction. So to give a little bit of background on what that means, pre-design is just the very beginning conversations, when one of the design build consultants will come out and meet with you, talk about your project, talk about your program. What we call your program in architecture is your wants and needs, and really kind of size each other up, so to speak, to see if we're a good fit. Once that happens, we want to move into producing a proposal for you. And if that looks good, then we go into conceptual design. And conceptual design is where we figure out all the big picture stuff. This is where we're going to measure the existing house. We're going to do our research so we know what we can do from a jurisdictional standpoint, if there's any sort of barriers that we need to consider in terms of maybe we're on hillsides or something like that, and then start producing some designs and get some ideas in front of you and get your feedback on that. also put together a scope of work, and then probably as important as any of those other things are, put some cost to it, because it's easy to come up with these great ideas and designs, but we want to always ground that, and maybe ground isn't the right word, but make sure that we're also not decoupling the cost from the actual design. Once we have an idea, okay, here's what we're moving forward on, then we go into design development. We get all our details worked out. That's where we put together a plan that we're submitting to the city that has all of our engineering and all those other requirements. We're also working out all the interior design details, creating a set of working drawings that have everything figured out, all the way down to, like, paint colors, maybe tile selection, fixtures. And then finally, we get into construction. And construction is, I'm not going to say that that's the easy part. I think, construction is always going to be a challenge, but we have a means of making it less intimidating than it might otherwise be. And that's going through, we have key meetings, we have a weekly progress meeting, and we're working towards a finally developed plan, right? So it's not like we're just kind of figuring this out as we go along. And if we follow this process, then we're going to have a successful project. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more when we get into looking at this particular home, how some of these things applied. So let's talk about this home. So the home was actually built in 1969. And, when we talk about mid-century modern, this isn't probably what most people think of. It wasn't an architect designed home. It had its benefits, but it had its kind of drawbacks as well. So it was tired. Almost everything needed replacing. The windows were leaky. They were the old aluminum sliders that are just notorious for being about the least energy efficient thing out there. The stucco was bad. The roof was bad. The house was worn on the inside. It had a lot of its original details, but they were just in pretty poor shape. But one thing that it did have is it had this beautiful, potentially beautiful park-like setting, that it was on a large lot with a pool in the back and some mature trees surrounding, just a lot of great features to work with. And the general layout was interesting. So here you can see that we just took it all the way down to the studs. So everything essentially had to be removed, and we needed to start over on that. I don't know, Jeremiah, do you want to add a few things along these lines with these slides?
Maybe if you could just back up one, Danielle, to that front shot. This is what you see. This is what you saw when you walked up the driveway to the home. And I remember going out there the first time with Jesse, and Jesse came back to the office and said, "Oh, we've got these great new clients. It's this fantastic project." And this is what I saw walking up the driveway. And I was just like, "Jesse, are you kidding me?" The house was just, I mean, as Jesse said, it was just so tired, and it really didn't have, it was really lacking in any architectural character, hardly at all. It was tired. It was, and again, that lack of detail. And as we start looking at some more photos, the clients, started pointing out to us where the house wasn't what they wanted it to be. And they weren't living in the home at the time. This was actually, they had owned the home for a number of years, and it was a rental property. And this was going to be the home that they were going to retire to. So they had their list of things that they wanted to improve on the home. As Jesse said, it really was, we touched it, and we'll look at the floor plan in a minute, but we really touched it from one end of the house to the other. Everything, from the windows, as Jesse said, to the stucco, to the roof. The footprint in the end, you can see the dramatic level of work that was done to the home, but we'll see in a minute, the actual footprint of the home didn't change at all. It as Jesse said, it had the potential, it was there, and it just needed a lot of work. As I said, even within the existing footprint, you can see in this photo in the backyard as well, you can see the pool here. Not only did we use the existing footprint of the home, but the existing footprint of the property as well. The pool, as you'll see in later shots, was remodeled along with the home, as was the backyard. but it was all done within that original framework of the property.
Well, what Jeremiah was saying that the home really needed was a vision. And one thing that I had meant to talk about earlier that I think I need to mention was that we did have some special clients here. So when I met the clients, a lot of times, you know, we go into these places and what we're seeing is not this tired house that just needs to be renovated, but it's the potential. And that's what the clients were seeing too in us, that we were going to be able to bring that out. And you know, they were special people, so they had uh, an appreciation for art, and as you'll see later, they had some beautiful art to add to the home. They also had an appreciation for architecture, and you know, they wanted to make this home special, and they saw that we were going to be able to work with them to provide that. So that was one of the really from the very beginning in that initial conversation, they saw not only did we have the vision to bring to the equation, but also that we had that process that we were going to be able to apply. And I want to talk a little bit about the earlier stages before we got to this stage where we've, you know, transformed this home, as you can see in this picture from the exterior. In that conceptual design phase, we explored quite a few different ideas. And one of them was, because we knew the roof needed to be replaced, we thought about, well, does it make sense to go with a kind of nudge it a little bit more in the direction of, you know, high modernist with a flat roof and maybe some clear story windows all the way around. And so there were some of these other ideas that were explored. But ultimately, one of the reasons that the house remained as it was is because when you have to take on a project as extensive as this, because there really was, as Jeremiah had mentioned, there was no surface that didn't need to be renovated. There was no system that didn't need to be renovated. There was no exterior or interior that could be left untouched, no piece that could be left untouched. So when you're looking at that kind of a scope, it's important to also look at the cost of that. And so very early on, we started putting some cost projections together, and we were working with our clients from the early stages to a budget. And I think that's a thing that's important to mention, because it's not common in our industry. A lot of times, if you were to hire an architect, they go out and design something, then you have to go out and get bids. And until you have a full set of plans that are permittable and maybe even permit in hand, it's really difficult or impossible to get a solid bid. So we're able to, because of the experience we have in our industry, very early on, apply a very you know, disciplined approach to projected costs that we find are very close to what we end up in the end having it actually cost. So here's the floor plan that Jeremiah was talking about, and you can see that the basic footprint doesn't change at all. But once we get into the floor plan, you can see that we'll have some closer shots. You're going to see some dramatic changes. So here's the before. I'd like to point out that this house is interesting. It's got this entry area. You can see, just let me get my pen. You have your entry area here. Wow, that's not exactly how I expected it to. Let me change it from highlighter to pen. There you go, Jeremiah, thank you. You have your entry area there, and then you step down into this private wing of the home, and then you step up into the public wing. So the private wing is to the right, and the public wing is to the left. And then you have this incredible backyard. So that was something that was intriguing in terms of its design. It was something to work with, but obviously there was some work that needed to be done.
I think this
So
is a good point at which, Jesse, to start to just touch on lightly a lot of the problems that the home had, that the homeowner came to us and said, hey, and it's hard a lot of times for a homeowner to articulate why something is wrong. It's a lot of times with architecture, it's just something you feel. It's something that, you know, just doesn't feel right. And there was a lot of that in this house, and you'll see with the interior photographs. But, you know, for instance, Jesse mentioned the entry. You had these two wings of the house that were connected by the entry here. And it, for some reason, that entry had the roof framing over it had been, it was lower. It was lower than either one of those wings, even though you were stepping down from one wing into the next. And so it was this very claustrophobic entry. And not only was the entry claustrophobic, but it was wide open on both sides. There's a door, the front door was here, but there was also a back door to the backyard as well. So as you approach the house, and we'll see in photos, you saw straight through the house. And not only did you see straight through the house, but when you came into the house, you looked straight from one end of the house to the other into what wasn't a very attractive kitchen. So you came in the front door, and again, it's something the homeowners just couldn't articulate because they had a relatively open floor plan that somebody had attempted, you know, once upon a time, but it just, there was something that just didn't feel right about it. You know, these, again, we'll see in some photos, there was an attempt to have somewhat of an open floor plan here, but this whole entry experience here, you could go from this room to this room to this room, and then this little doorway into a very dark dining room. There, and the kitchen, we'll see in the photos in a minute, there was just lots of problems there. One of the things too is that the homeowners, you know, most homeowners, and these ones in particular, you know, don't come and go from their front door. They're coming and going most often by the garage. These homeowners were the same way. They were parking, they were coming up the driveway here, parking in the garage. And so their entry experience into their home was into this very awful, it's called a bedroom on the plan. Not quite sure what it was originally, but then you went through this just terrible, tight pantry area past a dark windowless pool bathroom there off of that pantry into this tight little area in the kitchen. That was the homeowner's experience coming and going from the home. So that was something that, you know, was a high for, as the architect, was something that, granted, the homeowner wasn't articulating, but was in the back of my mind. Same with the bedroom wing. The primary suite was at the far end of this long hallway here, and this hallway was miserable, windowless, dark, and
Narrow.
and the bedroom was at the far end here. So that was, again, something that we wanted to improve for them. Then, as Jesse said, the homeowners knew that they wanted to eliminate this turnabout driveway here. They wanted, you know, we see a lot of people that want to add them. These people wanted to take it away because they really didn't have much of a front yard here, and they wanted a much nicer entry experience. They do a fair amount of entertaining, and they wanted a really nice, attractive entrance to the home. And then Jesse mentioned the backyard, and it really is there. This home is at the end of a cul-de-sac. It's a large lot, but the backyard, I mean, the backyard could be a park. I mean, it had the potential of that, but it was broken up. There was block walls here, there was block walls here, there was a lower elevation walkway here, there was a bit of patio here, then you had the pool deck here, a walkway going to the garage here, you had the pool in the back to the back of the yard here, and then a fence and gate down to this area of the backyard here. So it was just this one, it was just like the house. It was broken up into these warren of spaces that just felt terrible. So that was one of the reasons, and as Jesse said, why the budget is so important from the very beginning, is that the homeowners knew that it all had to be taken care of. You know, they wanted to move into the home and have it all done. They made that perfectly clear. We don't want to phase this. We want this all done when we move into the home. And, you know, so as we started looking at those conceptual designs and what we could do with the home, it became really clear really quickly that, hey, we need to be creative while at the same time being conservative to create a beautiful home to live within, while at the same time holding back some of that budget to accomplish and realize the potential of the site and the yard as well. So, as if I can continue, Jesse, you know, if we kind of look at the same order of things here, this is This is the plan that we developed in conceptual design with them. So you can see the driveway, that turnabout driveway in front here has gone away. And then we were able to create this entry experience. So you come up the new driveway now, and here's actually where you start entering the home. You come up this threshold of steps, and you have this nice path that goes past all of this beautiful new landscaping and takes you to this new front door, where we've raised the roof on that entry now a bit to make it feel more comfortable. We eliminated the back door to the entry. So when you come in the entry now, you're entering the home, you're not entering the entire property. And we created, no longer are you looking down the whole length of the house here. We're really trying to create an entry experience, making you aware of the architecture around you. And so you come in and you step up into the hall, into a short hallway here that takes you into, and then as you come around these corners, this fantastic space reveals itself to you. And not only does this fantastic space reveal itself to you, but it's only when you come around the corner then do you have this fantastic view to the backyard. And one of the things that the homeowners that we did with, and working with them, is, as you can see on the plan here, Danielle, if you go back one to the existing floor plan, you can see this back, the connection of the house previously to the backyard. There was a window here, a fireplace here, a small sliding door here, and a small sliding door here. Now, if you go to the next slide, Danielle, the new plan, what we did is we completely, so as you come around the corner from the entry now, you come into the living room, and then you look through the house, and we put in what they call a multi-slide, multi-panel sliding door that opened completely the back wall of the house from this point to this point. And then it was also a pocket sliding door. So there's actually a pocket here that all of those panels slid into. So when you come around the corner and you have that door open, this space just flows out into the backyard. It really was tremendous. And we'll see some photos of that in a minute. Then this whole idea of improving the entry experience for the homeowner. So again, this is where they're coming into the home, this door right here. So it was really important to when we updated this room here and remodeled this room, and this whole experience of passing through that and creating a more beautiful space through here for them to enter their home in a really beautiful way and appreciate it. And then in the bedroom wing, we'll see the before and after plans. This area right in here, these guest bedrooms and bathrooms that adjoin them, the plan changed just a little bit. We tweaked it here and there just to capture some more space for the bathrooms, but really that was, a very light touch in terms of work there. They were still all new finishes throughout, bathrooms completely remodeled, closets updated, old rickety bifold doors on the closets eliminated and replaced. But really the driver in this wing of the house was the primary suite here. And, making that, again, it's the homeowners, it's their home, and making it as wonderful for them as possible. And so really what we tried to do was, it's so far at the end of that hallway. We really tried to, from a design standpoint, approached it to try to get, and it really worked out so that it feels like you're entering that suite here, sort of mid hallway. That hallway, again, it had no windows in it before. We put a beautiful new window in here. So it's really from this point right here that you feel like you're going into this private suite at this far end of the house here. And that included a remodeling of the walk-in closet here, a complete remodeling of the bathroom. And really importantly, previously there was a small sliding door here going out to the backyard. We've replaced that with, again, a double sliding door so that you can really open that wall up. And we have, a private little patio here. But the homeowners, he's a daily swimmer. And so having that direct connection here to the new lap pool in the backyard. And that was the backyard. You can see we got rid of all of those block walls that we'll see in some photos later. The only thing, but again, we were working within that existing framework. This is the same footprint of that pool that was there previously. What we did is we modified it and we divided the pool. The pool was a very large pool to a point where the homeowner said, look, we can carve our lap pool out of this existing pool. So we were able to keep the existing spa, put the new wall in there. It has an automated cover over the lap pool, so he can keep that at the temperature that he wants. It has the swim machine, so he can swim some short laps, but it's really for his daily swimming. And then, just opening this all up through here and creating a connection here, and really taking advantage fully of this fantastic piece of property that they have.
Yeah, so let's look at some of the photographs. So now that you have an idea from a plan view of what changed, now you can start seeing what a difference it makes in terms of actual surfaces and everything. So this is that entry, obviously the before, but you can see the front door there with a side light, the back door with a side light, that awkward view all the way into the kitchen, some just strange elements that didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. And then look at this, just what a transformation, right? This beautiful custom door with some obscure glass and some colored panels on it. And you can see that hallway that creates sort of a vestibule into the public area, and the sculpture there, and that wall that used to lead out into the backyard with a door into the backyard now has this wonderful piece of artwork that has lighting specifically designed to highlight that artwork. And that HVAC closet, I don't know if we talked about that, but there's an HVAC closet just to the side of that actually had a door from the entry. So you're coming into the entry and your experience is going to be kind of disturbed by this weird closet that if it's running, you're hearing the noise and all that kind of stuff. Now the HVAC unit is still there.
This was what Jesse's talking about, is this element right here. And it just, as Jesse said, you can see it had the return air grill here, it had supply grill here, it had supply grill coming out the other side. It had cabinet doors on the front of it, and the thing just rumbled. You came in, the house was under insulated, the whole thing had to have new insulation.
Oh, here's a far right lower picture. You can see those doors.
Yeah, and the thing just rumbled. Now, Danielle, if you could go back to the existing floor plan. So that's that element right there. Right here is where what we're looking at, what we're talking about, is that HVAC, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, that mechanical equipment sat right here, which is a great location. So when we were looking at, okay, how do we make a new plan work here? How do we improve this space? It really became obvious if you go to the next, the new plan, Danielle, that really needed from, I don't want to beat on budget too much, both from a budget and a functionality standpoint, being centrally located in the home, it really needed to stay there. And so coming up with a solution that worked with that. So if you can go back to those photographs, Danielle, as Jesse was saying, we had the whole house just had a menagerie of different grills that had been added over the years. That was one thing that we wanted to update as well. And as you can see in these photos, one of the things, if you go to the next slide, Danielle, so that HVAC, that mechanical equipment is still behind this wall here. And that's one of those grills. So all the grills were replaced throughout the house. And it's those details, it's those small things that can make a huge difference. But one of the things I wanted to point out here, a couple of things, was when we approach a design like this, if you go, could you go back to the previous slide, Danielle? You can see we actually had three different, when you came into, two different, but when you came in, somebody had really tried to dress up this entry with this beautiful marble flooring, and it didn't work. And one of the things that we did, if you go to the next slide, Danielle, is the flooring really played an important part of giving the house a really cohesive feeling, as well as making sense of the different spaces. So, there was carpet scattered throughout. So when we opened up, there was tile. So when we opened up that floor plan, the public, and what you can see in these photos here is that when we come into that entry, we still have those two wings of the house, but it became the entry experience, it really, the feeling of having this new wood flooring, we put new oak flooring throughout the home. To your left, that oak flooring continued, and to the right, where we enter into that bedroom wing of the house, the homeowners, we looked at some different options, and they picked out some of the most beautiful carpet, soft, beautiful. I mean, it was fantastic carpet. And just having that, when you're standing in that entry, those different floor treatments, having that consistent floor treatment go from the entry into the public spaces of the house, it really draws you. It just, you're standing there and it makes sense. This over here with the carpet, that's not where I'm headed. I'm headed around the corner here into the public spaces of the home. And the other thing I would point out here is this is looking down that hallway, and we'll see a before photo of that hallway in a bit. But that's going down toward the primary suite beyond.
So now we have the before of the kitchen. So it was a narrow galley kitchen. You know, one of the things that you've probably seen this before, and some of you may even have it in your homes. This was an attempt of creating this open plan in 1969, but you know, the designers felt like, well, we can't get rid of all the cabinets. We still have a similar problem today. So they would hang these upper cabinets from the ceiling, and then you have your lower cabinets below. So you have this narrow area that, you know, you imagine if you're entertaining or something, and somebody's trying to talk to another person. You know, you're looking through this small space. It's really awkward, and yet, you know, we thought it would be a good idea to keep the kitchen in its existing location for just continuity, respect of the existing ideas behind the original design, but also for budget reasons. So you can see the after photos and what a transformation it is. This is a real-time video, by the way. This is how quickly it happened. And there you go.
I think it's interesting to point out is to get your bearings as you're looking at this photo. The kitchen sink, which you see there on the island, and the range behind it are within about a foot of where they were previously. So if you go back to those before photos, Danielle, you can see the sink. The sink is here, about here in that photo, and the range is right behind it. They're pretty much in the same location as they were previously. The other thing I'd point out in that photo as well, that before photo, is when I was talking about the homeowner's entry experience to the home and their daily use of the home, this right here, this doorway, you can see how miserable and dark this space is. So Danielle, could you go back to the existing floor plan? That's this opening right here. So you're looking into that pantry area that goes to the garage. So this is 2, 3, 4 times a day. That's where the homeowner is going. So if you go back to those before photos, Danielle, that's what they had, and it was miserable. And we'll see some more before photos of that pantry in a minute. But you can go back to that after photo. So really, you know, the plant just opening everything up, you know, and this kitchen, the wonderful thing about the kitchen is the homeowners really wanted that kitchen in the middle of the home, you know, not necessarily in the middle, but they wanted this showcase kitchen. They wanted it wide open. And at the same time, so it's in the plan. It's there. It's in the middle of everything. You're connected to everything. But what works out really well is you still have this work area immediately behind the island that with the plan that we worked out and the flow of the spaces around it, it really does, people stay out of it. So you still have this very workable kitchen with this work area behind the island there that's still wide open to the rest of the house. And one of the things that they wanted is they didn't necessarily want it to screen kitchen. You know, it's in the middle of the home. These people have wonderful taste, and we talked about, and you'll see in some photos in a minute, there's you don't see the refrigerator, you don't see the stacked ovens, you don't see the microwave. We've put those around the corner into the pantry. So we looked at, and we actually were on site with the homeowners to work out, hey, does this feel right? If we were to move this refrigerator from the main work area of the kitchen and put it around the corner, or just, you know, off to the side here where you need to take a couple steps, you know, it worked out. We worked that out with them actually at the home. And then looking at finishes, one of the things that the homeowners were very interested in, and we talked about and we worked through, was a consistent detailing throughout the home. So from the front to the back, through all of these spaces, the detailing is consistent. So all of the cabinet details, you know, small things like cabinet hardware we changed up here and there, but this rift sawn oak cabinetry is consistent throughout the home. So what that does is, you see a little bit of it over here by the entry, you see a little bit of it here by the bar, you see all of this at the end of this room. It doesn't necessarily scream kitchen. And we also did that with things like the backsplash behind the range, is that typically you look at a kitchen and there you go, you've got your beautiful tile up behind the range. Well, they had that previously, and what it does is it says, hey, here's the kitchen, here's the range right here. And we thought about it, and we thought about, hey, let's do something that is unique to the home. It was just a matter of, we started by saying, okay, if we do something unique, a cleanable surface behind the range, we landed on some glass. Well, if you put that glass behind the range, you can put anything behind that glass to look at. And so we looked at some different things, and we settled on this burled olive. We looked at some different wood species and just tossed around some ideas and settled on this. I had forgotten, Jesse, when we were looking at these the other day, it did come up, and we did talk about it in a meeting, that the homeowner, he's a psychiatrist, and this was a bit of, I remember him saying, well, it's maybe a little too Rorschach-y for me, but
Yeah.
but he did. She loved it, and kind of got a kick out of that. But
it also looks like it looks like it could be a CAT scan or something too. But I guess you could read into it whatever.
Is the daylight. Another big difference is the daylight. And as you move, so this is that right here is that entry that we looked at previously that was so dark. That's that same corner where you went around into the pantry area. And we added a new sliding door around that corner that really floods that area with daylight now, which made a huge difference. So this is that that I just highlighted. This is as you moved into that pantry / laundry, headed toward the garage. So you're looking down the length of that. The garage door is beyond through this doorway down here. The pool bathroom is behind this wall, which we'll see in a minute. But it just really was an unpleasant space. And here you can see we're looking down that same space again, but small things like, you know, adjusting the opening so that not only the flooring, so we talked about that consistent flooring. So as previously we had tile there and wood floor, engineered wood flooring in the living room, now we have this consistent oak flooring that's running through. So it's really connecting those spaces, as well as the ceiling. You can't quite see it in this photo, but taking the header out, you know, that doorway went away and became an actual opening so that the ceiling itself continues from one space to the next. So now what was a separate pantry laundry area really just feels, when you're standing, particularly at this spot, like an extension of the kitchen. So in the previous photo, you know, where we were looking at that island head on, you really didn't have a sense of this space, of these things, that what was going on around the corner. It's only once you're actually in that working area of the kitchen that you see that, okay, the kitchen really does extend down this into this area as well.
And it's absolutely functional too. You know, it's not a traditional triangle, but everything's just a few steps away, and it works very, very well.
So this is a shot of the pool bath, what's called the pool bath, off of that pantry area there. And if it was like all the bathrooms. I mean, all of the before photos of the bathrooms that you'll see, they all look like the same bathroom. They were all as dated as the next one. Pretty original furnishing, finishing throughout. Danielle, could you go to the existing floor plan? You can see here how tight that bathroom was, and it didn't have any windows. There was no daylight in it, and so it was just a very tight. So we looked at what we did is, this all, once we decided, once we had an idea of what our kitchen was going to be and taking advantage of this space along here for an extension of that kitchen, then it became a matter of, okay, what can we do with the rest of this to try to fix some of these problems? So if you go to the new plan, Danielle, you can see with just a small change. So this is where I was talking about. We opened up that wall a bit and really connected so that your kitchen, when you're standing in there, this is what feels like the kitchen. And we added that sliding door here. And then we're able to just, with the moving of a couple of walls here, we were able to just change the footprint of that bathroom subtly to get ourselves a window, to get some natural light in there, which made all the difference. And just move a couple of the fixtures around to give us room for a much more generous shower in there, which again made a huge difference. So if you go to the after photo, Danielle, you can see it just getting that daylight in there, opening it up, we selected fixtures in here. You can see the wall hung sink. Anytime you're dealing with a small footprint like that, anytime you can get things up off the floor and have more floor, the space will feel larger. So that was something that made a big difference as well. So this is that room. Danielle, could you go to the existing floor plan just so we can orient ourselves? This is what we're calling a bedroom. This is that room as you're coming in from the garage, going on into the house here. So if you go back to that photo, this is the garage. This is the door to the garage. So this is really this is what the homeowner comes home to. And so making that, talking and working with them about, okay, what do you need? You're coming home, you're coming in from the garage. We even, the garage, the homeowners, from the minute the garage door went up, we don't have any before photos of the garage, but you can imagine what it was based on the rest of these. Even the garage was drywalled, painted, epoxy floor put on it. So really, once the door went up on the garage, that was them coming into their home. And so when they came into this room, it was a matter of, okay, what can we do with this? We know we wanted to move the laundry to give us a bit more room for the kitchen. So the laundry came in here. Storage was important. It really became a landing zone, a drop zone. This is where you're coming home. You want to change your shoes. You want to drop keys, packages, whatever you're bringing in, as well as the laundry. Lots of storage and a small workspace that they wanted in there as well. Here, but there you can see again that consistent cabinet detailing throughout the home. This is the important thing about to highlight in this photo, these photos, I think, is we've seen this view of the kitchen before, but in this photo here, this was this house's connection to the backyard. They had this sliding door here. As I said, the fireplace, there's a window here, but that was the home's connection to the backyard. And this is what they have today. So this is looking toward the backyard. Again, their brand new kitchen. The thing we talked about, that multi-panel sliding door. So this, you can see that door is open, and this room ended up, if you go to the new plan, Danielle, what we did, and you'll see in a moment, is we have the kitchen here. The homeowners wanted a flexible space right here that they could either use as a breakfast area, but they also like the idea of having some casual seating there to take advantage. you know, enjoy the view to the beautiful backyard, as well as be connected with someone who's in the kitchen doing the cooking. So in the photo, you see we have a breakfast table there, but it really does work out nicely that even though we have almost 2 dining areas in this large room, you'll see in some photos in a minute, we created at the far end here, there's a very intimate dining, more formal dining area. And where that comes, you know, even though we have this very open floor plan, it's in the detailing of it's through the use of architectural elements that we start to create spaces within open spaces that distinguish one space from another. And we also did that with the lighting. So even though these spaces are wide open, there's small features within them that we were able to create a very intimate dining area that's open to all of this, adjacent to this sliding door. So that sliding door opens right past this more formal dining area as well. But with the lighting, some elements here and there, it really does create a feeling of a separate, intimate space.
Well, and I don't know if this is the best place to point it out. Can you go back to that slide, Danielle? But there's also a door, just a swinging door from the kitchen, because even though those sliding doors are really dramatic and beautiful, and you're able to open it up and have this great connection, they're not the most convenient to use just if you're just walking out to water your plants or something like that. So we have this other door that was part of the plan as well that you can see there.
It was more about that door was about grilling. He was a griller. He knew he was going to be going in and out of the kitchen quite frequently. You know, even on days that they weren't going to have those doors standing open. So that convenient swinging door was important to have.
In this next set of photos, you can actually see those mirrors along that wall in the lower left photo. That was the view out to the front yard. That's it, right? So, you know, it's very cut off. The one window is actually facing the bedroom wing. And you can even see in there that we've traced over these walls to kind of show what it's going to look like once it's open, so that the homeowner could kind of picture how that was going to come together.
Yeah, as we opened up those rooms, as Jesse said, there was that one window that did bring in a lot of wonderful light, but was looking directly across at the stucco wall of the wing opposite it. So that kind of it's the process of figuring out. It's like, okay, this window doesn't work. We want to flood this space with light. We're changing the front yard. We want to create this park-like front yard with beautiful new landscaping. So, you know, it's just the process. That's when it revealed itself. That's when we got into this rhythm of windows across the front of the house and eliminating that one window that was there, freeing up wall space. As I may have mentioned, the homeowners had some beautiful artwork that they wanted to highlight. And so giving them the walls that they needed for that also informed some of the decisions that we made. But here in that photo, what I point out is when I was talking a minute ago about those things that distinguish spaces within a large open space. So even though this is, as we've seen on the plan, even though this living room, dining room, kitchen, even though it's wide open, at the same time, structurally, we knew we had to hold things up. There was a beam line in there previously, but we replaced it, and it was a conscious decision. We had the opportunity. We could have pushed that beam up into the ceiling, so it just disappeared, and this was an uninterrupted ceiling from living room into dining room. But it was a conscious decision, and to distinguish those spaces. So even though it's wide open, and it's not just about distinguishing, it's about the other features in the room. The proportions of this living room being quite a long room to give us that beautiful rhythm of those tall windows across the front of the house. It had a bit of symmetry. It had this focal point on this new fireplace. So we took out the old fireplace to allow us to open that up to the backyard. We have this new fireplace. Now we have this symmetry in this room with these new display shelves that we built. So it all starts working together. So this beam, there was a conscious decision to say, no, we're going to leave that beam drop down because we want this subtle distinction between the living room and the dining room. And there's other things that we did as well to just small reinforcements like that in those spaces that make all the difference.
Jeremiah, go back to that photo for just another minute, Danielle, if you don't mind. So Jeremiah had mentioned the shelves. We actually came back and built those shelves. So originally, a lot of these furniture pieces were purchased after the completion of the project, or kind of during actually, and then planned to be delivered. And I remember it was during COVID, and she said, "It's funny that all the furniture stores are, they don't let you go in the furniture stores because there's never anybody in those furniture stores anyway." I thought that was kind of funny, but they weren't able to find. Originally they were going to have some bookshelves that they were purchasing for that spot, for those spots on either side of the fireplace, and they weren't able to find something that worked. So they actually asked us to come back and build those for them shortly after the completion of the project, which I think it demonstrates the fact that we're still on speaking terms at the end of a project, which, if you talk to many people, that's not always the case. I think this photo is a nice one to show that the rhythm of those vertical windows that face out toward the front. There's 3 on one side and 4 on the other. Really beautiful, kind of modernist feature, and also the structural element, the pole that's helping to support that beam. So letting the structural element express itself there. And this is when you come around that corner, you see past that. Wasn't always clear from the plan that cabinetry is opened above, and it also, as Jeremiah was pointing out, it's the same consistency with the cabinetry essentially throughout the house. And it's probably worth pointing out that originally, when the house was designed, the cabinetry was consistent throughout the house in the original design. It wasn't great cabinetry, and it had lived a good life, but it was all time to replace. Speaking of original cabinetry, I think that's what they used to call cultured marble, that countertop there. That's actually a prefab cabinet that we used in this bathroom, I think. As Jeremiah pointed out earlier, most of these bathrooms, every one of the bedrooms in the private wing pretty much had its own ensuite bathroom, and it wasn't necessary to make dramatic changes in the layout. So they're pretty much following the existing layouts, other than the primary suite. Now you see that riffs on oak again. There's that long, unattractive, dismal hallway. I almost expect to see it like a candelabra at the very end, like the Haunted Mansion or something, right? And just as the after photo will just demonstrate the dramatic transformation of that. So that door to the primary suite was brought forward, as Jeremiah pointed out, in the plan view. And then we added this round window so you get a glimpse of that beautiful backyard.
If you could back up, Danielle, I would just say, as I was mentioning earlier, this is, from about this point on, it's just circulation space beyond that, and it's just wasted. It's just dark and dismal and just, no man's land. And there really was, with the use of material and color, and the addition of, as you'll see in the next photo, the idea was to really make it feel like you were entering that you didn't have to keep walking to get to that primary suite. You really felt like you were entering that private, very private area of the home that was the homeowner's, from that point that I just showed you. And it was just as simple as, we were looking at, and you'll see in some photos in a few minutes, there was an existing fountain that years ago, so before this was a rental property, the homeowner had lived in the home for a short time, and he had put in this fountain in the backyard, which it has some dated elements to it, and she really was on board with the idea of doing some extensive work to it. But he had designed it back in the day. He said, "No, I would just leave it alone, leave it alone." So we were working around that with some of the things that we were doing in the backyard, and it was right adjacent to this window. So it really, when we thought about, okay, we're doing away with this concrete walk that came out of that door from the entry that went straight into the backyard. We're taking out all that concrete. Now we have this area for this very small, intimate garden, and we worked with the landscape designer as well to come up with plantings that this fountain then became sort of a focal point backdrop a bit to this very detailed planting immediately outside what we knew was going to be a new window. And then was just thinking about, okay, this window, the sky's the limit with what we do with this window. And it would, you know, we just, you know, that again, there really was, you know, just as we talked about at the very beginning, the house didn't, there isn't a lot of architectural detail to the house. And that was one of the things that we'll talk about in a minute too, is that, you know, we kind of had to work with what was there. And we knew we were putting all new windows and doors in the house. It was kind of an opportunity to say, okay, as we're looking at this house from the back, you know, you go into this beautiful backyard and you're looking back at the house, let's give it something that is fun, something that makes it unique, something that, you know, gives it a bit of detail that's unique to this house. And that's where, you know, I stumbled on the idea of, hey, we want to look out at this little bit of a garden. When you're doing that, it's like you want to frame it. And if you're framing it in this unique way, that's where, you know, we came up with the round window. It's a very large round sort of porthole window that really is a fantastic. And again, it's the homeowners, because nobody else goes down this hall but the homeowner. And so it really is this wonderful experience for them as they go into their suite.
Well, it actually has a connection to that fountain in another way too, because the fountain is made up of discs. So you've got that circular pattern that's repeated in the shape of the window.
If you say so.
Subconsciously, let's just say. So here's our primary suite. And, you know, that one, the photo that says before there, that's the door into the primary closet, the walk-in closet. Subtle changes here, but you're going to see how much of a dramatic difference it makes. So just creating these two pocket doors that open up into that closet, they said most of the time, 90% of the time, those are going to be open. So we didn't want to have something that swung into the space and interrupted the space so it slides into the wall. But now you have this just much more accessible space, but it can be closed off as well. And then look at that slider, the quad slider. Not only do you have this beautiful connection now to the backyard and that little private garden, but all this light coming into the room.
Danielle, if you could go back one slide to the before photos, another, you know, so shortcomings here that, you know, as Jesse mentioned, this was the door to the closet. And I thought we had a photo of the door going into the bathroom, but if we go back to the existing floor plan, Danielle, this is the area that we're looking at right now. And so the next thing we're going to look at is the primary bathroom here at the end. And you can see what we did is we had this little door into the closet over here. We had a little door into the bathroom over here on the opposite wall, and no connection to the backyard at all from that room. So if you go to the new plan, Danielle, as Jesse said, just opening this up made this primary closet, this walk-in closet, just feel much larger when you were in there, much less claustrophobic. And then when it came to the bathroom itself, it really made a huge difference both for the bedroom and the bathroom, getting that small door off of this wall and taking advantage of what's really become sort of an entry vestibule to that primary suite and putting that door into the bathroom here. And you know, that was done with eliminating a small closet off the hallway there, but we needed a little bit more square footage for that bathroom because the homeowners really had a list of things that, you know, they wanted in that bathroom, which included his and hers vanity, a dressing table, really critically, a walk-in shower and a separate freestanding tub. So looking into that bathroom now, you can see the new vanity there on the left. Lots of storage, nice large linen cabinet going along with that. And then on the right, you can see the what we call a damless shower. So it's accessible. There's no dam on it. You walk in, there's no door on it. You walk in around the corner. So that eliminates the need anytime you turn a corner with a shower like that. It contains the water, and you can eliminate the door, which they wanted to do, and then the new freestanding tub as well.
And it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. That's a really great means of providing for aging in place. You know, a lot of times our clients will come to us and say, hey, I don't want anything in the long term forcing me out of this house. Like, I'm in great shape now, but who knows, in 10 years or whatever, I may need a walker or be in a wheelchair or something. So I want to be able to still be able to get into these spaces.
Even though they all look the same, I think it's worth going back a slide, maybe, Danielle, and seeing those before photos of that bathroom.
Now
So
we're going to spend a little.
Go ahead,
Go
Jesse.
ahead. Sorry, Jeremiah. I was going to say we want to spend a little bit of time talking about the transformation of the hardscape and landscape. And so we have this before site plan. I'll let Jeremiah get into the details, but we talked about a lot of this already with the rounded driveway that we wanted to eliminate, this cut up backyard. It was a very large and deep pool. So the pool was original to the house, 1969. I think it was 12.5 feet deep. And it could never even warm up. You know, it was August before they could even feel comfortable swimming in there because of the depth of that pool. So, you know, that was an important thing to think about, you know, redesigning.
Yeah, as Jesse was saying, the improvements here are this whole, as we talked about earlier, is all of the hardscaping. I'm trying to remember. I think maybe this bit of concrete here remained, but otherwise all of the hardscaping was replaced, including the driveway. We talked about, you know, this new entry experience, this new entry to the home. Really, what you'll see and what you saw in one of the first photos is we had sort of a palette of materials to work with, including that slump block, that concrete block that the planters and some of the site walls that were existing on the site. And so by adding this new slump block wall, by using what's there, and adding that along here, we did that to create somewhat of a privacy, and as well as that whole entry experience from the driveway, but a privacy from the street, which really allowed us topographically to, you know, as we said, the house sort of steps down from here to here to here, as does the site. And so this sloped, you know, toward the street. And by adding that wall here at the entry, it allowed us to level off this front yard here outside of that series of new windows that we placed here. So the whole goal there was to create this beautifully landscaped area that this part of the house then could have an exposure to. And then the backyard, you know, we talked earlier about all of the walls, the way it was chopped up so much. And so it really, as Jesse said, it's the existing pool, all new plaster, pool tile, et cetera, the addition of the lap pool. And again, the only thing that stayed, I believe, was the fountain, which you can see here in the photos. And you can see in these photos as well, you can see the fencing here across the backyard that divided that backyard and separated the pool from the house. You can see here what what exposure to the backyard the house had previously. And in this photo, you can see here, this was the fireplace that we eliminated in order to open up this wall with that multi-panel sliding door. And then the shot of the existing fountain here that, you know, I remember meeting with them on site, and, you know, he being very adamant that nothing was going to be done to that fountain. and her being adamant that something had to be done with that fountain. So between a little bit of tile work and new equipment, but the biggest thing is the proportions were just wrong. It just didn't look right. It didn't feel right. So I think in the next photo, you can see that it was just as simple as getting him on board with the idea. We just need to bring these bulls down. We need to bring them down and spend some of our landscaping budget on some plantings for that as well. So it really felt like a part of all of this new work. And here you can see in this photo, you can see the connection of that primary suite now into this all this new backyard patio space. You can see the new swim lane there that we added to the pool. Again, that's the existing pool that we added that to. And here you can see all of that wonderful openness and connection from inside to outside. You know, one of the things that I'll point out too is that it's the small things. Like I talked about, working with the existing palette of materials there, because we weren't going off in another direction with the character of the home. The homeowners really weren't interested in that. The budget didn't allow for it, because as you saw, we touched everything in this house. And so small things like, you know, so much of a home, particularly a home like this, so much of the character of the home is established by the roof. It's one of those things that you really can't put your finger on, but it is the roof that starts to define a house that's as simple as this. So if you go back a slide, if you go back to the before photos, Danielle, you can see how weak the roof is in relationship to the house. It just all color-wise, it all just sort of blends together into this muddy mess. And the weight of it, it doesn't seem to have any substance to it. So if you go to the after photos, Danielle, what we did is when we replaced the roof, at the same time, we also replaced what they call the fascia board, which is this board here that runs around the perimeter of that roof line, and giving it that rich contrasting color that is more a color of the roof itself. Now the roof is this strong element that, again, even though the house doesn't have a lot of architectural detail, now it has some substance and some weight to it. So as you stand back and look at it, it really is a much more attractive home.
Well, I think the width of that fascia board also increased, didn't it? Didn't that?
Yeah, certainly. It got much deeper.
Now we're back to the front. I mean, this is just such a beautiful entry now with the landscaping and the series of windows, and you can see that slump block. It's part of the vocabulary of the house, and it's the historic vocabulary that is honored through the use of this element in the front as well. So I think it really just brings a continuity to the home, as well as providing with the other solutions that Jeremiah mentioned, with the practical solution of the grade change and also the privacy from the street. So it just all comes together, and that's really what good architecture does, right? Sometimes it's, you know, this house, it was tired. It was, as they say, long in the tooth. It needed to be renovated, but it had good bones, right? It had bones that, through the proper eye and the proper judgment, and with an enlightened client, could be brought out. And that's exactly what we did. And I'm so just happy. And I know the clients are as well. They just love this space and enjoy it every day. So we were just so pleased to be able to work with them to make this work out as it did. And I'm just so happy to be able to share this with you, because this isn't unique for us. You know, these kinds of projects are what we do, and we put our heart and soul into each and every one of them. But you know, they're all special and unique, but they all aren't unique in the sense that I can't think of a single project that I look back on and say, wow, you know, that didn't quite live up to what we had initially planned. They're all amazing. So I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I'd like to take a minute and see if we have any questions. And also just really quickly, if you're interested in what we talked about today, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out if you want to have a consultation. We can do that as well. If you think you have a suitable project and you'd like to have one of us, uh, Bill Judson or myself or Carla come out and speak to you, talk to you about your project and meet you in your home. We'd love to do that. We also do online consultation. So we'll do a virtual consultation over Zoom, and follow us. So we're all on the socials, so follow us there. But did we have any questions that we want to go over?
Hi, yes, Jesse Jeremiah. Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for such a great presentation. It's always so wonderful to see some of our finished work, especially this beautiful project, and just reminisce and really hear the story behind it. So thank you, and a
Thanks,
round of
Christina.
applause to you both. Yeah, of course. In terms of questions, it looks like we answered most of them, but I did leave one here at the end. I think a lot of folks are wondering, but the one question we have is, how long was this project in construction?
So, believe it or not, we were ahead of schedule on this project. And part of that is we work really hard to put a schedule together. I know you're saying you're not answering this question. It was about 8 months. But to get into a little bit of detail on that, we do work really hard to put together a schedule that we think is going to be realistic, based on all the elements that are in play. It's a little bit more challenging to do that now because, as you might have heard, there's sometimes supply chain issues and shortages. This was just before COVID mostly, though I think that we completed it during COVID. Let's see, we were during COVID, that as right as it was coming to an end. But it's a little more challenging to plan for that. But we do plan for all the unknowns, such as long lead times on appliances or windows or things like that. So it's important to us to meet our timelines as well.
Great. Well, it looks like that was the last question.
Terrific. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed what you saw, and we'd love to hear more from you and see you again sometime. Thank you very much.
Have a nice evening, everyone.